You enter a bright room, cabinets on all corners inviting you to play. They have one thing in common, good music. You are entering the Music Arcade. Intro. Hi everybody, I'm Galen the Sound Guy Firestone, and welcome to Music Arcade, the new podcast all about game music.
Hi, I'm Ranakel, and I think sometimes video games are okay.
Sometimes.
And I am Eddy, and I have nothing to say here, so let's move along.
Okay.
Music Arcade! Woo!
Finally. This podcast has been kind of in the works for a while. I feel like I started planning some version of this thing maybe last year, back in 2019, and it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
Basically, the concept got 2020.
But as 2020 years its end, also do the excuses why we can't do this podcast, so we're doing this podcast.
If only as an act of defiance. But also because we all three really like video game music.
Yes, indeed. Those of you who watch and or listen to Gathering Gotchas know me and Rano very well. Eddy is new to our little podcasting group, but he is... go ahead and tell us about yourself, Eddy.
Well, there's not much of interest in the world of music that I have done in practice, but I am an amateur pianist. I write about music on my personal blog, where I write mostly album reviews. And I am, as the accent might have made it clear, Brazilian. So I also come from a very third-worldy culture, and I got basically every game late until the mid-2010s. And that pretty much informs my opinions on game music a lot.
And Rana, let's go ahead and have you say a little brief thing about yourself.
Hi, I'm Ranakel, and I went to music school once. So that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek remark, but I do not have a music background of any kind. I just like listening to video game music. I'm French, I'm in my mid-30s, and I like, a lot of different video game music, both Western and Eastern, throughout the years, and hope to share some common overlooked pick and some very niche stuff with all of you listeners.
And then there's me. I'm somehow both the most and the least musical person here simultaneously. I am a professional recording engineer and sound effects editor, currently living in Los Angeles. I have a degree in audio production from the Art Institute. I have 10 years of industry experience, almost none of that spent on music itself. My musical aptitudes are long-term piano lessons as a child, which I haven't picked up in about 10 to 12 years, and some mixing and mastering, but a whole lot of nothing when it comes to theory and composition. So, much like Rana and Eddy, I'm just plain old a fan of video game music, and I've always been very passionate about it. And... yeah.
And really, if you have passion, the rest can follow up.
Pretty much. And that's kind of one of the main reasons I wanted to do this podcast. I originally thought of the idea, I'm not sure what the original impetus was, but I believe it was around when the FF7 Remake concert was announced, and I bought tickets for it, and I'm like, I feel like there should be a forum to talk about this. And...
then it got 2020.
The concert and the podcast both. Thankfully, the Los Angeles concert, the Microsoft Theater, was very nice enough to actually hold my ticket that I bought for this year. So my seats are actually the same here in LA. So when that concert comes back, I'm actually going to be able to go see that as it should be seen, which is going to be fun.
Kudos to them.
Yeah, I don't have to rebuy the ticket. The ticket's still good. Unlike the New York show, which I will have to rebuy. Tier. But yeah, so since things are starting to come back to life, let's talk game music. And we wanted to kind of get into this by talking about some of the music that inspires us and some of the music that, is important to us. on a personal level, and I would go ahead and like to throw this over to Rana, and please, by all means, go ahead and give us the album and just music that makes you sing.
Not quite sing, of course, but early on, I've started playing games pretty early. I remember having at some point an Atari, like the one with the wood grain finish in my hands. But I really got into games and understood games, which wasn't always a given, because as a reminder, I'm French, and I didn't start learning English after a while, so a lot of games I just literally couldn't understand what they were saying, but over time translations got better, and my own understanding of the world and of English, if relevant, got better around the Super NES era, while also having some interest in computer games. So this leads us to Command and Conquer, the first one of its name, by Frank Lepacki, or Frank Lepacki. I'm never really sure how it's pronounced, if you do pronounce the C or anything. But yeah, the whole OST, it's the first soundtrack I had in my hands as a CD, that I remember anyway. Followed, for the record, by the fourth OST of Dance Dance Revolution and FF6. But CNC itself, it does have this special place in my heart, and it also really works. In particular, if we're going iconic tracks, we might as well go with the very first one from the CD, which is Act on Instinct.
Okay.
It's got the heavy guitar riffs, it's got the voice samples that are reused throughout the tracks, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a very distinct part of Klepacki's style. Yeah, it's basically, I think it elevated the whole game. Not only this track, but the whole OST, and it was an era where things were not all that detailed. Camera was pretty zoomed out. Your soldiers were like 10 pixel fighting, but when you have this track on top of it, suddenly those scrambling pixels become this cool war, and you're directing it, and it feels awesome, and yes, there's explosions everywhere, and it's super cool. And yeah, it really guides the pace of it, because most of the tracks have this rock theme, have this solid sustained pace that indicates, even though it's a strategy game, that you have to get some action in there. You have to move things fast, which was aided by the severe improvement the interface had compared to other games that came before. And even on its own, even outside of the game, that track had these many different movements where you have the calm up, point, 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 and then you go da 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 da. It's awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my pick to start. Act on Instinct from Command & Conquer. It leaves a mark. It's still good today, and Frank Lepacki, judging by his role in the recently, I think it did a track for Lethal League Blaze, which is also awesome, and yeah, the legacy in more than one ways lives on.
Always good when a composer has a nice, long, healthy career. I have a number I could talk about that did like 2 games and vanished into the nothingness, and I'm like, they could have given us so much more. We deserved more.
Ooh, I feel you on this one.
Klepacki did strike it hot, let's say, because he pretty much started with Command & Conquer more or less after a couple of years doing other stuff, and Command & Conquer is a huge franchise, and I think he's done every soundtrack for the franchise to this day, including Red Alert.
I think he did Red Alert. I'm not sure. I don't think he did Red Alert 3, however. That was a different team, I believe.
I think he didn't do Command & Conquer 4 because he had left EA by then.
Yeah, and the less anyone has to touch Command & Conquer 4, the better.
Oh, big time agree.
Shots fired. Never played it.
Don't. I mean, you can't even because it was always online. Yeah. So yeah, things are still. I mean, he did leave his mark on most of Command & Conquer, and I think he was back on board for CNC Remastered.
Oh, nice.
Which includes a different version of Act of Instinct on the OST, among other things. And the ability to quickly shift from the new art style to the old art style, and the new OST to the old OST. More options are good.
I agree.
But let's move on from Command & Conquer to some other game. Eddie, what do you have for us?
Well then, my story will probably be the weirdest because I am the one person from a third world country here. So picture this. It's about 2001.
Okay.
I have about 7 or 8 years, and I am playing what's, for me, current gaming, the Super Nintendo. We got consoles that late at the time, and the Super Nintendo didn't even arrive here officially. We only had the Mega Drive, which is the non-American name for the Sega Genesis.
Right.
But I got the Super Nintendo as a gift from my uncle. I think I was 6 or 7 when he gave it to me, and that was current gen for me and for most Brazilians. The 16-bit era was current gen in the early 2000s, and as a kid, as opposed to who I am now, I wasn't very much into music. Ironically, it's not that I didn't like it, but I didn't care for it. My mom listened a lot to sort of folk music and what labels tend to call world music, which is basically folk music from other countries that we don't hear often about.
Other folk music.
Yeah, basically folk music from Asia and Africa, right? And she was a huge fan and still is a huge fan of Enya and that sort of new age stuff. And so that wasn't very much something a kid would enjoy. But around the year 2000, 2001 is when I first got into enjoying music through Gorillaz' first album, their self-titled. And coincidentally, that was also around the time where I met a friend at school who had Super Metroid, which I had never played before. And Super Metroid is very ethereal in its soundtrack. It's very even diegetic at times. It's very ambient, but it sort of meshed well with me because I had already been listening to that sort of stuff coming from the albums my mom listens, like Enya and Lorena McKennitt, and this time I could tell it was actually something for me because it was a game. It wasn't, one of these old people making music, things that a 7-year-old thinks, right?
Yeah.
So I really, really enjoyed it, and it's pretty much the first soundtrack that I recall it sticking with me. I had played Super Mario World before, I had played Super Mario Kart before, but nothing really stuck to me like Super Metroid soundtrack. And I also, even since that time, I've always had a sort of inclination towards developing depression because my mom has depression and it can pass genetically.
Right.
And to this day, I do have depression. and it has led me to enjoying more bass-heavy stuff because of gothic rock and gothic metal, which is more down-tempo, low-paced, more relaxing at times. And Super Metroid has this track in Brinstar, which has 2 tracks, that whole area of the map, but one of them is the overgrown with vegetation area, which plays
that's
in
the
parts
green
that are-
part, right? The first one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
where it's green, and I think the one room where it's full of what's either ash or spores, grayish spores.
Yeah.
It's a huge room. I think it plays there as well, and it has that very deep bass at times. Like it goes dun dun dun, and that really stuck
Yeah.
with me. That sudden drop
With the
really
woods
stuck
in the
with me.
background as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really great, and I've since heard many orchestrated versions of it, and I'm now a huge fan of orchestrated music in general, and I really love that, and that bass drop stood with me to this day, and I still really love it, and it really sets the mood because it's sort of ethereal, like those spores, which you don't know where they are coming from yet.
It just says you on an alien planet, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's ethereal, but it has that dark undertone because right around the corner is Spore Spawn, one of the most hated bosses from that game as a child, because there was virtually no point to where you were safe on his boss room.
Yep.
I hated that thing, for the record, more than Ridley.
I can understand
yeah,
that. You also have a lot more stuff by the time you reach Ridley.
Yeah, it's much safer. But yeah, that really stuck with me, and I can't explain now why that stuck with me, but other folk music at the time and other ethereal stuff didn't. But
And over lighter music, like you said Mario Kart, and immediately my head went.
yeah, it's I think that's related
Tastes
to
are personal.
Yeah, I think it's also related to the fact that mental illnesses like depression, they vary depending to the person, the symptoms and that sort of stuff. And so the overly happy stuff has never really meshed well with me. And now that I look back, I think that might have started way back when I was 6 already. I just didn't realize it. Because it's not that I hated it, it just didn't click with me. But Super Metroid really did.
Super Metroid. Enjoy it if you're depressed.
Ouch.
No, not really. It's a great game.
I'm
Soundtrack's
joking. I'm
amazing.
joking. It is a
Owie.
great game. It's one of the best Super Nintendo crafted games.
It really is. Hot take, I like it better than Super Mario World.
Oats and Goats is gonna haunt Rana's nightmares now.
Oh dear. What did Oates do?
He speedruns Super Metroid.
Well, I mean, yeah, I just thought you meant that was a more recent thing, that he did something silly, like he did it one-handed or two-player, one-controller or something like that. I know he did do a
he
two-player,
keeps-
one-controller run. This is totally off topic.
Yeah, he keeps doing that sort of stuff. I get his channel recommended to me on YouTube. He does a lot of ROM hacks, and you just go, how does a human finish this thing?
By being
yeah,
that
that's-
good.
Yeah, that good. But yeah, that's my pick, and now on to Galen.
I'm going to be the obvious guy. So, my first game system ever was an old 1988 Game Boy Brick. But my first console was the Super Nintendo. I never had an original Nintendo. I never had a Sega Genesis. The Super Nintendo was my game. And there was a lot of stuff that really I was getting into enjoying the music of. Obviously, Mario World comes into that. I did play Super Metroid. I managed to sneakily get my hands on a copy of the first Mortal Kombat, even if the Super Nintendo version didn't have the blood. But it was when Nintendo Power did a run on Final Fantasy VI that I kind of went, okay, I kind of want to try this out and play this. I was in, I think, middle school at the time. I don't know. It was 93. I don't think I played... Did I play it year it came out? I don't know. It was a long time ago, one way or the other. So I played FF6, and immediately the game struck me just the power of that soundtrack and what the 16-bit music could do. Terra's theme in the opening cutscene. The regular battle theme with the simulated horns, which MIDI horns is hard, y'all.
Yeah.
But the one song that got me and continues to get me to this day was the opera. One of the, like, turning points in video game music history, because how the heck did you do that? And I say turning points, but it really almost wasn't, because FF6 was still kind of this niche game, even if it did sell very well on the Super Nintendo. And while the music was very well regarded, technically, it didn't really have that same audience, like, just, it didn't have that same audience retention that, you know, more obvious Super Nintendo music like Mario World, like other games of that nature, really, really connected with. But for me, it was like, wow, I could make a serious argument that the opera in FF6 was the first time I got actually emotional at video game music.
And Eddie dropped the term earlier, but it helps that the opera music is diegetic.
Yeah, it is. It's taking place in the scene. It's not random. It's there as part of the story and is sung by one of the characters. Well, sung, it was vocoded, but yes. Yeah. You know, and my love for that soundtrack got so much. Remember how I said I played piano as a child? The first book of sheet music that I was able to get my hands on that wasn't directly related to my piano lessons was, in fact, the Final Fantasy VI sheet music.
Ooh.
I more recently, by more recently being like 10 years ago, bought another copy of it, so now I have it again, but unfortunately that first book got destroyed. Not an incident I'm going to talk about. But yeah, I learned to play several of the songs in there, and one song, the overworld music, a version of Terra's theme, I actually had to reorchestrate because it was missing lines, and I'm like, I need a second person here, so I'm going to rewrite this as a duet. Mm-hmm. So I actually got a second pianist to come in and help me do a version of this song that actually had more of the lines in it.
It sort of kickstarted your love for sound engineering, you know, in a way.
In a way, yeah, and I still, like, occasionally poke at the idea of orchestration. Like, if someone sends me a blank MIDI, I will put instruments to it. I have the full, like, Native Instruments complete set and Reactor and stuff like that. I don't play with that much. I play with Reactor for sound design, but not really orchestration so much anymore. This is kind of different. It wasn't until the next game in the series where the music of the series started really blowing up, and that was FF7, obviously. More recently, I played FF7 Remake on stream, and I spent a lot of the time talking about the soundtrack, which was basically a very, 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 very good rearrangement of the original soundtrack. And one song that came up in discussion was One Winged Angel, which is arguably the single most famous piece of video game music of all time. It's that, it's Mario's theme, it's Legend of Zelda. Those are the top three, right?
And now all three are in the same game.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I forgot they just announced Sephiroth for Smash. That literally happened like 2 days before recording.
One Winged Angel when he appeared. In fact, One Winged Angel starts before we see the character.
Yeah.
Because, sorry to hijack a little, but yeah, that track has such an influence. I remember back in 2002, 2003, I was on a PHP forum that was talking about FF7, and one of the sub-factions of users in the forum was the Church of One Winged Angel.
Oh, boy.
Not the character, the song.
I get it.
Oh boy.
Now, I have to say, for the record, I don't actually like that song that much. That said, I utterly... I'm sorry?
Heresy.
Yeah, fine. On the other hand, I'd be an idiot not to respect just how much of a turning point in music that song was. It blew everyone's mind. It did what video game music what Smells Like Teen Spirit did to rock music, which is completely break down the old with a hammer and show everyone what could be. I said at the stream when I was playing FF7 Remake at the time that I could absolutely write a master's level dissertation in music history about the historical influence of One Winged Angel as a song. To say that song is an inspiration, regardless of, I'm sorry, Geyser just said something so incredible that my train of thought is completely derailed. How?
I mean, well, you know what?
Last year.
If you will look past the weird fact that it happened, the fact that we made someone discover this song is a justification enough for the month's toiling for this podcast. We've already accomplished our mission.
Yeah.
All the rest is just gravy.
I'm actually for... Yeah, no, that's awesome. I don't know how, Geister, you managed to avoid it for that long, but good job? ? Anyway, where was I? All right. Like, yeah, it's just one of those things that is just so big. And in fact, the first video game concert I ever went to was Video Games Live at the Hollywood Bowl. This was like early 2000s, I want to say. And it wasn't on the program, but they actually played One Winged Angel, so my first video game concert experience included that song live. I have since heard it a lot of times live. They played it at every Final Fantasy concert, and I kind of wish they'd stop. There's other Final Boss music out there, guys. A lot of good ones, too.
Yeah.
Video Games Live is
I'm
great
of the
at...
opinion... I'm of the opinion that, as a whole, FF8's OST is better than FF7.
I actually agree with that. FF8 is my favorite of the PS1 era. I like it almost as much, or maybe even more than I like FF6. It's one of those two.
But it's also fair to say that Liberi Fatali wouldn't exist without One Winged Angel.
That is 100% correct. A lot wouldn't exist without One Winged Angel. One Winged Angel did, on an engineering standpoint, what was thought prior to be impossible, and that is have actual recorded samples on there. In that case, vocal samples, but before it was all MIDI digitized. That was the first time, in a major release at least, that you have recorded samples and people paying attention to recorded samples.
Yeah, the closest before, I believe, was Star Fox on the Super Nintendo that had good lore.
Yeah, I mean, there was that.
And that's
there was
not music.
Yeah, that's not the music necessarily. There was that. There was elements of recording all the way back from what was it? Altered Beast, Rise from Your Grave. I'm not going to try to do the sound effect, but like, yeah, there were elements of that in very, very short bursts. Certainly not long strings of lyrics.
Certainly not Estuas Interius ira vehementi Zephyra.
Yeah, none of that. That's for sure.
I took ancient Greek in college.
You did.
In high school.
You did.
But that was Latin.
That was. I was about to say, wait, isn't that Latin? But you're talking about Greek. I am lost. Anyway. So yeah, to say, just from the level of just what that meant, I could honestly take a look at One Winged Angel, a song I say again, for the record, I don't actually like to listen to all that much, and actually paint a pretty direct line from the possibilities that enter my mind from the existence of that song to what ended up becoming my career. Like, oh, you could do this with sound? Interesting. And it all kind of ballooned from there.
I gotta say, I'm in a bit of an awkward position because I don't really enjoy Final Fantasy, as everyone who knows me already knows.
Yeah.
But now I have One Winged Angel stuck in my head ever since you brought the name up.
Oh, it's been stuck in my head since the Smash announcement. I get it.
Also, I'm one of the heretics who prefers the version from Advent Children.
I don't know what makes you a heretic. That version is much cleaner.
I hate it. I mean, okay, I hated it when I first listened to it.
Okay.
Now I just like the original better, but acknowledge that it has a right to exist.
I think most people just mostly hate that they changed the lyrics.
Yes.
I don't speak Latin, so I don't really care about the lyrics that much, I gotta be honest.
I think the original has more elaborate lyrics, and the Advent Children is basically just Genova going, "Come to me, my son, come to me" in Latin.
Okay. Sure.
Also, fun fact, one of popular Japanese and American wrestler Kenny Omega's finisher is named One Winged Angel.
I'm shocked.
Because he's a huge nerd.
He's not the only one. Apropos of nothing, you just reminded me. I forget what her name is, but there's one absolute gigantic nerd in women's MMA who actually during a during the presser right before, like a few days before the fight, the official weigh-in, she actually like struck Sagat's pose, like
nice.
And I'm like, all right, I like you.
I mean, I don't want to bring her name up, but Ronda Rousey did Sonya Blade's voice on the latest Mortal Kombat.
Yeah. No, I don't mind her as much as some people. I don't know why you don't want to bring her up. She brought women's MMA into the mainstream, regardless of her actual level of talent. Like, I've got to respect her for pulling that off.
Yeah, heads off to that. It's just a shame she wasn't a very good voice actor.
That is true. She's not a very good actor, and that's been pretty consistent across everything she's done. Except, weirdly, I think it was Fast and the Furious 6 she was in, where she had 2 lines and then an extended fight scene she was actually good at. We are, once again, way off topic. Go us!
Yes. But I suppose the point that it all makes is that One Winged Angel was indeed influential on you and the rest of the video game music world, and maybe a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, it's a pretty gigantic song in terms of music history. So, yeah, it inspired all of that. It did, on some level, inspire me too, at least insofar as, wow, this is possible. I wonder what else is possible. And isn't, in the end, that inspiration what we listen to music for to begin with?
In part, yes.
Crickets, crickets, crickets. Wow, that, all right. I was trying to be inspirational. And I was maybe not inspirational, but I was trying to be at least heartwarming, and just no one. That was it's such a no-sell. Shit.
No, I was trying to bring that back to my choice about something about it, the song clicking with me despite my depression, but I didn't know how to word it.
My stance was more that you just left this perfect, shiny statement on the table, and it would have been a shame to touch it.
I'll take it.
If I was gonna touch it, I would bring it to my example and talk about why I listen to music or something, but I got nothing.
All right, well, since I managed
I listen to music because video game music is nice.
I mean, it is. I'm not going to deny that. Several of my favorite songs of all time are video game music. Like, it's pretty evident at this point that I managed to derail the conversation by saying something nice, which is the most backwards thing I've ever done in my life. So,
can Rana re-record his part of this podcast using that weird voice?
Can we not?
No.
Okay. What is our next topic? Heck this. Heck all of this.
Our next topic is the music from FF7 Remake.
Oh, great. Here we go again.
You
were going to do such a great segue to it.
I think the segue is pretty much natural. Like, it's already there.
Yeah.
You just have to push it a little.
Yeah.
But yeah, FF7 Remake, because it won Best Soundtrack of the Year in the Game Awards.
I disagree. Like, I know it happened, but I disagree with that choice. Despite me just saying this whole thing about FF7. Can I just start off? Because I have a thing to say.
Okay. Do your take, then... Sorry.
The soapbox is yours.
Do your take, then I will do mine.
Okay.
And then Eddie will cry.
Let's not make the new guy cry. So I love FF7 Remake soundtrack. I absolutely do. It's about as perfect an arrangement album as I could get. When we got to the Airburster, I heard that guitar riff on that just glorious boss theme kick in. I actually went, yes, loudly on stream for all to hear when that boss theme started playing.
I'm gonna talk about this music exactly as well.
Yep. I absolutely adored darn near every note. I could hum just about all of it, which is exactly the problem. The soundtrack is so good, but it's not original. I know that's kind of a sticking point that's weird, but like I already knew every note of the soundtrack going into it. Like, yes, the songs were rearranged, and yes, parts of other songs made it in, but I was still easily able to recognize what songs those were. There were some new tracks, all of which by FF13 composer Masashi Hamauzu, which were fine. They definitely don't stand out in my memory nearly as much as the FF7 originals by Uematsu did.
Which is a shame, because the soundtrack was by far the best part of FF13.
I'm not necessarily sure I agree with it, but the soundtrack was very, very, very good in FF13. I'm certainly not going to deny that. That was definitely one of the high points. And it just... That's kind of where my brain is just like, wait, but I've heard all of this before. And that's kind of my issue with it winning the Game Awards. I don't think FF7...
Okay, here's my take, then. Here's my take. So... As a reminder, I haven't played FF7 Remake.
Sure.
All I heard from it were 3 tracks.
Okay.
No, actually 2. One was the rearrange of the normal battle theme that's used in the gym, which is
funny.
Awesome. And the other is Airbuster, which I stumbled upon inside of a YouTube random playlist or something, and it hit me as I was listening to it, something that I wondered about FF7 Remake as a game, and that I just had to ask. So now I can finally get it out.
Okay.
According to my impression of this one track, is it fair of me to say that Final Fantasy VII is a game about environmentalism and the search for one's own identity?
Correct.
And that FF7 Remake is a game about FF7.
I hate to say it, but you're not exactly wrong on that one.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, and I'm saying that because some of those flourishes on Airbuster, the way the music starts with the theme and then completely goes in 5 different ways along the play time, wouldn't make sense if it wasn't an arrangement of an already existing music.
Correct.
Which is why I feel like a lot of the audience are people that already played FF7.
Evidently.
And that this soundtrack echoes a lot and kind of assumes that you're playing off of FF7, and that it builds on something that is already there.
Yep.
In the end, the 2020 Game Awards went to a game from 1997.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, word for word, I don't think it's the best soundtrack of 2020. It was definitely the best soundtrack of 1997, but...
Ironically, it happens on the same year where the best mobile game was one released 2 years earlier.
I was just about to say that too.
Among Us, I agree with Among Us winning the best multiplayer, because multiplayer is sort of an ongoing thing, but it also won best mobile game, but the mobile version came along with the desktop version 2 years ago.
That's really...
But
so
at the same time, can we really blame them from putting as little 2020 as possible in 2020?
Okay, well, when you put it that way, no, not really. But there were some really worthy contenders in 2020 for the Game Awards soundtrack, right?
Absolutely.
Look, the games were our only form of escapism.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of the nominees.
Yeah, let's do it. So there's 2 here that I flat out haven't listened to at all, and that's Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which I do intend to play someday, and Last of Us 2, which I do not. And this isn't me raging about Last of Us 2 in particular. I haven't even played Last of Us 1. It just doesn't interest me.
I am in the very same stance. Yep. So thank you for recruiting people you could have conflicting and diverging opinions about.
Yeah.
But on this time, we just have those two that are not, musically anyway, in our visors at all.
I should note at least one thing from Last of Us Part 2, where it won Best Audio Design, and I think it was warranted.
Okay.
First of all, Gustavo Santaolalla, I think that's how we pronounce it. Sorry, Gustavo, I probably butchered the surname. He's great at composing stuff with acoustic guitars, and I've heard some other songs by him and some stuff in other games.
Okay.
And I think a bit from the first Last of Us. I didn't play it. I don't have a PlayStation 4, but I've heard the soundtrack and bits of it. And dude's a pretty solid composer. And they had an interactable acoustic guitar in Last of Us Part 2, where you could play a guitar like it was a real instrument. You could change the chords, the scale, and you could play every single note. And there are tons of videos on YouTube of people covering actual songs in real time on the guitar on Last of Us Part 2.
That's awesome.
Even if I haven't heard the soundtrack, the guy is a real talent. Dude is amazing at what he does with music. And besides him, we also had Mick Gordon, who is a legend.
Oh, yeah.
And Darren Korb, who is the biggest indie composer right now. I'm not familiar with Gareth Coker from Ori and the Will of the Wisps, but
I think
I'm sure the soundtrack
Ori
would
because I looked it up a little bit, and it's more that the soundtrack contributes to the whole ethereal, whimsical, with occasional dark, corrupted part feeling that the game exudes, but that the soundtrack doesn't stick out enough by itself in my book.
That's fair enough. I tend personally to favor more thematic soundtracks as opposed to more atmospheric ones.
Maybe you'd like this one then. So yeah, since we don't have that much to cover on Ori and on Last of Us Part 2, maybe we have more to say about Hades and Doom Eternal.
I haven't played Hades yet. A lot of people are trying to get me to play Hades, and I do want to play Hades, but 2020.
a lot of people, including both of your co-hosts.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Hades' soundtrack.
Okay.
Because you're going to start the game, you're going to have a fire effect, and then you're going to hear 9 notes that should be enough to tell you essentially the tone of the game. So it starts with some strings.
Okay.
That gives off the fact that it's a game that happened in an ancient Greek mythological setting. It goes tong, 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 tong. And so that establishes this part. But then it also happens in Hell. And Hell, as we all know, is metal, which is why the next 4 notes are da 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 da. And that's how the game starts, and how the game kinda ends, because the main boss's theme's first phase is again the intro theme, that then gets increasingly more metal.
Okay.
And in the meantime, you have the soundtrack that's used to really dictate the pace of the game, because it's a game that has a very frantic playstyle, but not all the time, because there are some cooler movements when you have the area. It's divided in areas according to different parts of Hell. So there is this main theme that's quiet and calm, and then it ramps up when you're fighting enemies, and then it ramps up when you're fighting mini-bosses, and then it ramps up again when you're fighting bosses, and
So it sounds like there's a variable mix thing going on.
Yes.
Okay. I can
And
appreciate
it works
variable
very
mix.
well. Yeah. there are also, of course, because it's a Supergiant game, a part where there's a song with lyrics, several in fact. I think there's one for the end credits and one as a payoff to a side quest of sorts.
Yeah,
and I want to get my 2 cents in there because
By all means.
many people who might be more into music, and I'm sort of, out of the 3 of us, I'm the guy who will be delving to more history stuff because I love history. Again, my mom was a geography teacher, and a lot of the music in Hades, especially the ones with vocals, is informed by this ancient Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And the idea of this myth is basically to tell a tale of not looking back and just moving forward with you, despite your losses and all that. But the idea is that Orpheus was the greatest musician in all of Greece, and his lover, Eurydice, was one of the nymphs of the forest, and she dies. And the only reason Hades allows Orpheus to try and bring Eurydice back to the living world is because Hades himself gets too emotional and too struck by Orpheus's music, which is very full of grief because of the loss of his beloved. The story ends with him saying you can bring her over to the living world as long as you don't look back until you're on the other side. But as he takes his final step into the living world, it's still halfway into the stairway into the underworld. He looks back and Eurydice is lost because he couldn't stand to only look at her at the end. And both of these characters, Orpheus and Eurydice, are characters present in Hades.
Okay.
In fact, the ending theme is in-universe, sung by both of them, and is in-universe said to be a composition of Orpheus, and he says it's his best song or something like that. Meanwhile, there's another song called Good Riddance, which is said to be a composition by Eurydice, which in the game she's also a great musician. And the game...
And a great cook.
A great cook as well. That's her quirk, gameplay quirk. And you would think that a game where the greatest musician in all of Greece is a character would really, really butcher that idea, but you really believe it. You know that it's Darren Korb doing this stuff.
Right.
We know his work. We know that the voice of Eurydice, her singing voice, is actually Barnett, as she's always their female vocalist. But you still believe the music is good enough that you still believe that is the greatest musician in Greece. Even if it's not entirely Greek folk, you do notice that it's sort of Americanized, for the lack of a better term. But they do an amazing job at making you believe, and the themes of these songs with lyrics are very in tune with Greek mythology. The final theme of the game, which I won't spoil the main storyline, but it the ending theme ties to the main story. It's all about people inheriting stuff by their blood and them belonging in certain places by their nature. And the main character is the son of Hades, and there are other things I won't spoil. But you see that a lot in Greek mythology, with the greatest Greek heroes being usually sons of either Hades or Poseidon. So they do an amazing work, Darren Korb and Ashley Barnett, at really making you believe that this music is coming from the world you're looking at, instead of someone trying to fake it and failing hard. And
but you know what the best part about what all of what he said is? Is that it's pretty much entirely optional. You can just walk right past all of these elements.
Yeah, the entire Orpheus questline is entirely optional.
Huh. Yeah,
Which is bold.
I'm going to be
Yeah.
honest. One of my biggest pet peeves in video game music, with an exception generally for end credits, mostly because I come from a film and TV background and you get used to it, whenever there's decipherable lyrics, and I say decipherable as in if it's English or Japanese or real-world actively spoken language, I give kind of a pass to Latin, but that's about it. It just bothers me on just an intrinsic level, so...
Hades' music shouldn't bother you then, because all of the tracks are either without lyrics, the end credits, or diegetic.
Okay, I can kind of live with that.
Good Riddance. When you hear Good Riddance, it's because either Orpheus or Eurydice are singing it. And Orpheus is the court musician for Hades.
Okay.
Once you free him from his prison because he refuses to do his job.
Yeah, pretty much. And another shout out I want to give on this soundtrack in particular is to the song that made Ranakel call me a friendly madman because I said I use it on my workout playlist. It's
Okay.
The theme to the second phase of the final boss. It's as metal as you can get. I would
It's
argue
very fast.
I would argue it's more metal than Doom Eternal soundtrack, and it includes
That's
the
a heavy
shredding
claim.
guitars. And it includes the shredding guitars by Masahiro Aoki and Daisuke Kurosawa. So
Why do I know
there's
those
some
names?
pedigree there.
Okay, I think to best reflect the way this song goes, let me talk about Hades' weapon selection.
Okay.
Because in Hades, you have the classic ancient Greek weapon types. You have the fist for the close fighter, you have the sword, you have the spear, and you have the heavy machine gun. This track is more leaning towards the heavy machine gun.
And the heavy machine gun can turn into a laser gun.
And also does mortar as a side job. And I think I'm doing this remark tongue-in-cheek, but I think it reflects Hades' general idea of taking these Greek myths and making them into an exciting, action-packed, loopable gameplay.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. God of War, we were talking about that off stream, so yeah.
Yeah.
So, Greek myth is a pretty fertile ground for good games.
That it is. And, now then, since, does anyone have anything to add about Hades, or shall we move on to Doom Eternal?
I think we should move on. For the record, like a lot of what I listen to in my personal life is heavy metal. So I immediately gravitated towards what I heard of Doom Eternal soundtrack. I'm like, this is good stuff.
I remember my first brush with Doom Eternal's OST was before Doom Eternal or the OST even came out. I remember I think I was following Mick Gordon's Twitter account because he did a recruitment drive during the recording of the OST to have a heavy metal choir.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I saw that on his YouTube channel. I think he posted it.
Yeah.
It's some amazing stuff. This choir, I think it's supposed to be the cries of the demons and the people being put to torture in hell or something. And the choir is basically a bunch of people who sing rough voices in death metal or thrash metal. And there's also the one guy, sadly he has since passed away.
Oh no.
From, I believe the band is called Tengar Cavalry. It's a folk metal band focused on Mongolian culture. And the dude did throat singing, Mongolian throat singing.
Oh
and
wow.
he's part of this choir. The entire choir is just heavy metal singers. Usually
and
on
that
the
wasn't
more extreme end.
That wasn't Mick Gordon's first brush with Mongolian throat singing either. He composed the OST for the Xbox Killer Instinct reboot kind of thing.
Right.
And
The
in
first
it,
two
there's
seasons.
and in it there's a character that's Jago, that's Mongolian and has the Mongolian throat singing as part of his soundtrack. And then there's a shadow version of Jago, which takes the same bass for the track, but replaces the throat singing with heavy metal screams. And it's awesome.
That sounds pretty great,
Can't get more Mick Gordon than that.
Yeah. So there's this link between these two themes, these two tonality, that he's already been willing to explore, and that he's explored more in the Doom Eternal soundtrack. Which is awesome.
I have nothing but respect for this guy's work. Heavy metal is one of those genres that is very easy to do very, very wrong, and you have to have a certain amount of oomph to you to really get it right. And I feel like he has the right combination of technical ability and oomph.
Yeah, I think his only fault is that he's too much of a perfectionist. Hence the delay on the official Doom Eternal soundtrack coming out and him not working with id Software anymore, because he stays too long producing it and trying to get it to be 100% perfect, which is great for us but horrible for business.
Yeah, that level of perfectionism, like I've seen it a lot in the film side of things. It happens quite a bit, more often than it should, and I get it. But there is a proverb in the entertainment industry: "Perfect is the enemy of good."
We have it in French too, in fact.
Yeah, it's a pretty common trope.
But sometimes, you just have to say it may not be perfect, we might not have all of the elements, but let's record the first episode of Music Arcade.
Pretty much. And I will fully admit this first episode's probably pretty janky. We haven't found our voice yet, we haven't found our flow yet, but I'm still finally glad to get it out there instead of trying to make it absolutely the best I can. There's room to grow on things, and there's room to accept that you could have done better in the past, and that's what the future is for.
And now the world can hear Ron and myself being deadpan at one another rather than it being relegated to chat on Discord.
Pretty much, I guess. Welcome to the team, Eddie. I mean that. And
I already feel welcome.
And unless we have more to say about Doom Eternal, I think it is about time.
I am curious about one thing, which is, in your opinion, did the Doom Eternal soundtrack bring something that Doom 2016's soundtrack didn't?
I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't listen to either thoroughly enough to answer that with any sort of authority. I would have to get back to you on that.
My opinion is a bit tied to the lore of the game, which for some reason Doom Eternal has a lot of lore. So to anyone listening, spoilers ahead, but Doom Eternal adds, I think mostly by bringing the female singers as well, when Mick Gordon did that heavy metal choir. Those female singers, they kind of add this element of there is some beauty there, but there's also some ferocity in their voice, because their voice still is very much female. You can recognize this as being a female voice. It's not like Arch Enemy, the band, where you could maybe pass it for thinking it might be a male singer.
They started with a male singer, and then Angela Gossow, and now Alyssa White Glues. So, yeah,
pretty much.
And I honestly had trouble telling the difference between the original male singer and Angela Gossow when they first switched over. So,
yeah, but in Doom Eternal, it's very much a case of he preserved sort of the the higher pitch that is common with female voices.
Mm-hmm.
It just made it very rough.
This does tie in nicely with the veneer the game has, at least at the beginning, that we should be kind of understanding to the mortally challenged.
It also ties to part of the lore where there's these creatures that look like angels, but they are just as evil as the demons in the lore, which they added to Doom Eternal. It wasn't in the 2016 game. So it fits very well with that part of the lore, and I think that is something he added. But other than that, it is pretty much Doom 2016 plus a little bit.
Which is pretty good in itself, honestly.
Yeah,
I'll take more Doom 2016.
Yeah, that's not a knock against it. It's still a solid soundtrack. Though I still do think Hades should have won. It's the most original of the 3 best soundtracks in the list.
Yeah, like, Hades' soundtrack is not Bastion's soundtrack.
No. I don't know. I'm still kind of in the Doom camp, but we have managed to agree that FF7, for all its wonderful composition, or wonderful arrangement, I should say, it just doesn't meet that muster, I don't think. It literally doesn't bring anything new to the table. It is just the same songs rearranged.
It is a strange pick.
Yeah.
And a stranger winner still.
No, I get why it was picked. Like, obviously, the arrangement work deserves to be recognized, and I mean, I like the soundtrack enough that I'm going to see not one, but 2 different concerts for it in 2 different states. So, like, I definitely got to say it's worthwhile in that regard, but yeah, it's definitely not.
It was just another safe pick in a year where most winners were safe picks from my point of view.
Unlike last year where they've celebrated Disco Elysium,
I mean,
which is one of the most important games of these last years, in my opinion.
Also a game that's on my list of I really need to play this, but 2020. Yeah, this, I mean, let's be honest.
If you're going to play it, wait until the release of the Enhanced Edition in end of March.
Okay, I will happily do that then. That seems like a good plan. Yeah, I don't know. If there's any year to do the safe picks, it's this one.
Especially as we mentioned safe picks from other years.
Yep. And unless we have anything more to add, I think it's about time we wrap this bad boy up.
Let's wrap this bad boy up.
Okay.
Let's wrap this bad boy up.
Speech, it's hard.
Words are very hard. That's why podcasting is not as easy as it sounds, and it really doesn't sound easy. Thank you, guys.
We sure as hell don't make it sound easier.
No comment. Thank you to our audience for giving this show a shot. Please let us know what you think, either on the Discord or on our various Twitters. We are looking to continue doing, and this show, we're probably going to be swapping weeks between this and Gathering of Gotchas. Sorry, Gotchas hasn't been around for a while. I can actually blame somehow this show a little bit for that not happening. We'll be back with Gotchas next week, I promise.
Thanks for providing a place where we can just gush about soundtracks we like.
And for providing a place where we can give our opinion without it being stuck in a small form full of echo chambers.
Yeah,
And then make someone listen to One Winged Angel for the first time.
I'm still baffled that happened. Yeah, and with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Eddie was kind enough to provide us with the script for the intro. We do not have an outro script yet. That will be forthcoming. Theme music, I think, will also be forthcoming. We shall see. Y'all are wonderful. Thank you guys so much. We'll be back next week with Gathering of Gotchas, and the week after that, or something akin to that, with the second episode of Music Arcade. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Y'all have a good one.
See ya.
See you next time.